there, viewers, and welcome back to the South Main Auto Channel. Got this 2005 Pontiac Vibe, pretty much a Toyota Matrix. Got towed in a couple days ago. It's been sitting outside. Got dropped off from another shop. They don't want to work on it. Instead, it has some major issues. All I know is it got towed in with a no start, crank's okay, and that's it. We had to push it in. Couldn't even crank in the parking lot. Battery was deader than a doornail. So I pushed it in. Well, me and Josh pushed it in a couple hours ago so all the snow and everything could melt off it. And in the meantime, I threw the battery charger on it. So I thought I'd bring you guys along so we could figure out what the heck happened here and see if we can get this guy back on the road. Anyway, I put this little black piece back on the shifter here. The dead battery can't. I couldn't put it in neutral, so you have to push the shifter over right there. Let's see. We've got. She got a lot of miles on her. Buck 74, 173, 696, so 174K. Let's see what it sounds like. Well, that ain't good. Well, that doesn't sound too good. Sounds like it's kind of firing there on one cylinder, but sure sounds like it had 3 other dead ones. It doesn't sound like it's got any compression, except for maybe one cylinder. So let's pop this cover off. That other shot might be right. This might be major. 177K. What the heck's going on here? Oh, must be taking that whole stud out with it. Yeah. That's not even the right nut there. The valve cover stud came out with it, so that's no big deal. I'm missing the back ones. We'll just take regular bolts. Alright, well, what we can do is, what can we do? We can do a relative compression test, see if there's anything got any oil in it. Yeah, she's just a smidge low, but it's not empty. What we can do, before we even pull out any spark plugs, we'll just grab our low amp probe. We'll grab a trigger here off one of our coils, and we'll just do a quick relative compression test to see if it is indeed low on compression. It sure sounds like it to me, I'll tell you that. Get these unplugged so it doesn't want to start on us here. I'll grab a trigger off one of those and we'll grab my low amp clamp. Let me show you how we're hooked up here. I went ahead and just unplugged the injector so when we're cranking, so we're not just dumping it full of gas. I just front probed the trigger wire on the coil here using one of my new and improved front probes there. I got a little kit from AES Wave, which comes with all of these different style front probe connectors that have banana jacks right on them, so that's pretty handy, pretty cool little kit. Ivan's favorite little toy here, a little variable resistor. It's pretty sweet, so you can substitute that for sensors, and comes with a bunch of neat stuff, a little kit they put out. So I got that, been using that right along here a little bit. So like I said, I use that, front probe that connector for our trigger. Then got that hooked to a ground. Took our amp clamp, hooked it to the negative cable. Of course, the way I have this going, we're gonna have to invert the waveform on our lab scope. And I've got the lab scope set right up over here. Let's crank it over. So I got our scope set up here. We're gonna go ahead and just record this event. So I record. I'm gonna reach in and crank it over here. Pull the gas pedal to the rug. Alright. That should be plenty. Let that save a little bit. Did I hit the stop button, did I? Oh, yep, there we go, almost missed it, didn't I? Okay, so now what we can do is we'll get over here to our vent. All right, so this is pretty typical. Well, look at that, we got our trigger on the only cylinder that actually has compression. All right, so let's have a look at what we're looking at here. Wow, so this has this has 3 dead cylinders, so it's kind of a good guess just listening by ear. We can see our initial amperage spike here on the number 1 channel. That spiked up over. Let me make sure what scale we got this on. Yeah, we've got it on a 40 amp scale, so every 1 volt is 100 amps. So this spiked up over 200 amps initially, and then it was cranking around somewhere just a little over 100 amps. But we can see, even with the noise on that channel, that's kind of typical. So the hatchy there on the number 1 channel, that's pretty typical on a relative compression test. But we can obviously see, so there's cylinder 1, there's another cylinder, another cylinder, another cylinder, cylinder 1. So you have 3 cylinders in relative terms to number 1 are substantially lower. And hopefully you can understand the the overlay here of the firing event. That's how we know that's the number 1 cylinder. Our back probe is in the number 1 cylinder for the ignition firing event, and then it just so happens on this that the number 1 cylinder is the only one that has more compression than all the rest of them. Doesn't mean that cylinder is any good. It's just, relatively speaking, it's more than these other 3. So that's pretty definitive right there. We've got 3 cylinders with no compression and 1 with some. And I guess the neat thing is that we learned all of that without even pulling a single spark plug out. Of course, I think kind of made that call without even pulling the scope out. Just listening to this sucker, it sounded like we had 1 cylinder that's sitting. What? What is it? What? Come on, get out of here! Go spray your mouth. Yeah, go over there. Where were we? Kids. Yeah, so anyhow, yeah, we did essentially, relative compression test. We never even pulled the spark plug, but like I say, we could kind of determine that from listening to it. At this point, we can check to see what the compression is on the number 1, but that by itself probably isn't that good, to be honest with you. Now on this engine, maybe that wasn't 100% the best approach, but on a V6 where you can't get to the back 3 spark plugs, that is the test to do, because it'll save you a bunch of time. And the only thing I can tell you when you're doing that is make sure that you have a trigger. I almost got slid on this at my dad's shop. I was down there looking at a truck for them, Ford Ranger, towed in, no start, and it had a 4.0 in it. Our spark plug's pretty black, pretty flooded. You're not gonna squirt me? Yeah. Well, like I was saying, I was down at my dad's shop. This Ford Ranger cranked over, wouldn't start. It would just kind of cough and spit a little bit. And just real quick, I did a relative compression test on it. Man, the thing sounded like it, sounded like it cranked fine. Everything, sounded perfectly normal. And I've heard a lot of 4 liters crank. A lot of different engines. This thing sounded normal. So I thought, well, just for, I was just showing, one of my friends there, a guy that works there, just showing him how to do a relative compression test. Threw the amp clamp around that sucker, cranked it over, didn't put a trigger on it, and boy, you see just just picture perfect. Nice even humps. Motor sounded fine, and I don't know what we really did from there, but anyhow, I ended up leaving, And he continued to work on it. He called me back. He says, "Hey," he goes, "that truck's got 3 dead cylinders, no compression at all." I'm like, "No way." And so I immediately just stopped what I was doing, went back down there, threw a trigger on it so I could see each cylinder event, and I'll be darned, it was missing every other cylinder. So on the waveform, that truck it had a picture perfect relative compression test waveform, but being that every other cylinder in the firing event, which on a Ford was the one whole bank, had broke a timing chain is what had happened. And it was quite humbling, I guess I should say, because even to, I'm not saying I'm trained, but to a trained ear, or somebody that's heard a lot of engines crank, it honestly sounded perfectly normal. And then come to find out that, would have got burned, if you just called it at that point. But yeah, put a trigger on it and cranked it over, and it had 3 dead cylinders, every other cylinder. So I guess I would just tell you, always use a trigger. So now, because this one's really nice and easy, let's see what we have for actual mechanical compression here. Because just because number 1 had a hump doesn't mean it's actually any good. Alright, foot's all the way to the floor. It'd help with my compression gauge with a good Schrader valve, huh? Dang it, let me change that. They don't last forever, I guess. Especially if get them in hot cylinders. Because these compression gauge ones are very low pressure ones. Yeah, as I say, I'm pretty sure I got extras. Always something. Then the phone rings. Then somebody unsubscribes. Try this again. There, let's try this again. Round 3. So what do we have? 120, 130 PSI. So we've got 130 PSI. Which ain't much, people. This thing should probably be up around 190, 200 or so. That's not good. I guess what we can do, we've obviously got a dead cylinder here. Just verify that. We already know that because we already did the excuse me. We already did the relative compression test, so we know this cylinder is lower than 120. Looking at the waveform, it's probably substantially lower. Oh, this plug's nice and wet. I don't see any mechanical damage on it though. All right, here we go. What do we end up with there? Almost 30. Not a real big contributor. Well, that's the end of the road for this old girl. Obviously, something has happened. A relative compression test did not lie. And that piston's up. Let's see if I can rotate it, get the piston down. See if I see any beauty marks on it. A lot of gas sitting on top of it right now. All right, well, at this point, I looked down in the hole there, and you know, it's obvious there's not a, you know, big gaping hole in the piston. So more than likely we've got some valve trouble here, obviously. Jeez. Oh, it's under that wiring harness. So what we'll do very quickly, we should be able to just zip this valve cover off, have a look anyways what the heck might be going on here. But I'm willing to bet that the other shop is 100% correct in their assessment that it definitely is something major for sure. Here comes Mrs. O. Different bolts. This ain't her first picnic. This ain't her first picnic, Vanessa.
I'm sure.
Yes. It's always good when they hit the floor, baby. Let's see, we got enough pieces off it to lift it up. How many bolts we got? I think we got them all. Most of them, right? Ah, you big fool. I gotta learn how to edit better so I can get all that stuff out. Hey, look at that. That is very helpful. When you take them all out. Right here. Ooh, it smells like it's cooked. It's kind of stinky, I'll tell you that. Can we make any kind of initial observations? Is the chain hooked up? It appears to be. Shim under bucket valves. Camshaft looks like it's all there. That's weird. Any kind of timing marks, I wonder if we can line up some timing marks. This probably is like the Colorado I just did. Probably has odd colored links. Well, let's see if I can find some timing marks. Take it from there. I guess we can always see if this thing, see if everything rotates up here too. Let's check that. Well, did it rotate? I couldn't see a thing. I just played back the footage. It looks like things are spinning around. So our chain is still hooked up. Yep, so we got an odd colored link up top here. Might have to see if I can find some physical marks because, you know, lining up the odd colored links, we're gonna have to spin around for a while. I see the, I can see the tensioner down in there. It doesn't appear to be overextended. This is pretty bizarre, you know, to have no compression with no giant gaping holes in the piston and to still have the chain all hooked up. Huh. That is weird. I wonder if I can find a good cam crank correlation waveform, and then we could just, you know, if there is no marks, there's got to be marks. So the other way we could do it, you know, just hook into the cam sensor, crank sensor, and whiz this little guy over and see how they relate to a known good. But I'm gonna look, see if I can find some timing marks on the computer here. Just need to get that right up out of the way. So evidently there is timing marks. There's one down here on the side of the engine. I'll get it blazed off so you can see marks on the pulley. And evidently there's some marks on our gear here. Should be an intake and an exhaust mark. So I'll get some tools. We'll spin this little guy over, see if everything lines up, and figure out what happened. Let me show you what we're looking for before we even go over there. Let's see here. Where are we at? Okay, down on our crankshaft, we're gonna have a mark. You know, we got our 10-degree mark, our 0-degree mark. So that's gonna be our number one at top dead center. On the cams, see if I can find a picture of those. They've got a couple marks right here from cam to cam. It's gonna be labeled exhaust. And it's gonna have a dot on it there. So those two dots lined up, number one at top dead center on the crank, is what we should see. So we'll look down here on the side. That is our timing mark. I cleaned it off best I can so you can see the 0 and the 10, and you can see I got the mark lined right up with the 0. We're pretty darn close to it anyhow. But here's the big dilemma. As we come up here, if I can get you guys down in there to see this. So there's our EX mark and our dot. And look right straight across from that. This is hard to tell from this angle, but those timing marks are dead on the money. Might be able to see it better from this angle here. So there's our two marks. That one tooth on the intake camshaft is right in the crotch of the other tooth on that exhaust. But yeah, those marks are dead on. You know, along with the crank mark down there. That sucker's dead on. I did not expect to see that. This is pretty wild. So how in the heck does this thing have no compression? And it doesn't appear to have jumped timing. Of course, it's a variable cam timing engine. I guess the first thing that comes to mind, you know, when I worked in a truck shop, you know, we'd get this where pistons come up and, you know, rail the valves because you'd get some trucker, you know, he'd be coming downhill and he'd be riding his brakes and, you know, just couldn't slow the truck down, didn't downshift, or he did downshift and, you know, ended up getting the wrong gear and letting the clutch out, and that was the end of the road. But this thing's automatic. I wouldn't think that's possible. You know, it's one thing that will bend valves is, you know, over revving the engine. Putting this thing in neutral and just, you know, giving it the beans, it shouldn't be able to self-destruct. You know, certainly you could downshift it, you know, ripping down a hill and, you know, cause something like this, but that's pretty wild. I guess we better confirm that it is leaking out the valves. You can always leak, I suppose you could always leak cylinder to cylinder, but you know, in either case, you know, the head would have to come off. This is kind of weird. Just when you think you've seen it all. Well, we'll do the number 2 cylinder. We got the valve cover off, so we know what we know where the valves are at. Let's see if any of those are like excessively loose. Feel weird. It's hard to tell with the, you know, the buckets on them. So yeah, I guess we better find out where all this compression is going. It's going somewheres. Well, we've got, you know, 80% leak down. Coming out the intake. Let's go back and have a listen to the exhaust. And you can see that the lobes on the cam are up on the intake, and they're obviously off from the exhaust, so we don't have to worry about that. Go back here and have a listen. Where's the exhaust pipe on this hot rod? There it is. Oh, what's it sound like? Well, you can certainly feel air coming out of it. You can smell it. It smells like raw gas, but let's go have a look at the intake. That's a little bit loose. I think where it's coming out of this intake then. Oh yeah. Have a listen to this. Hey, well, there's your problem. And we can see the intake cam lobes are all the way up. This thing has crashed the intake valves on that cylinder. So did we have a problem with the, with the cam phaser? I don't know. Can that advance far enough to even do this? I don't believe so. Well, I guess that's it. No sense in really, going any further. This old boy's gonna have to make a decision. 177K on it. Is it really worth yanking the head off? An oil burning Toyota. These things like to eat oil. I see the tops of the pistons are pretty black. Even being washed out with gas, they're pretty black. This is kind of crazy. Those buckets are loose. As far as the fact that I can rotate my hands, so it's not like they're, stuck down or anything like that. So that's pretty wild. I don't know why it did what it did. Like I say, I don't know if the cam phaser can, advance to such a degree that it can actually do this. I don't believe it can. I don't think the company would make it so if there was a problem, it would self-destruct the engine. The only way to tell if that's working is to take it off and pressurize it with air and check its advancement. Yeah, I guess this is it. It's the end of the line. It's the end of the road. Show's over. All right, guys, that's it. Just spent the last little bit of time here of the day getting this guy estimates and trying to figure out which way we want to go with this thing. My recommendation was to replace the engine simply because it is an oil burner, and I talked to the customer and he confirmed that, which we could, essentially already see by looking down the spark plug holes here. So we did find a used engine with around 100K, 106,000. It was a car that was hit in the front corner, not even hard enough to break the radiator or break the intake manifold. So that's good. I was happy to see that. It wasn't out of a rollover or something that was really stuffed right in the front, busted radiator off. And the only reason I mention that is when you're looking for a used engine, if you get one out of a car that was rolled over, how long did that thing sit there and run upside down? Before it finally ran out of fuel, installed, or if it was hitting the front, did it sit there and run with, coolant, spewing out of it and overheating, so just kind of some things to think about when you're buying a, junkyard engine. So they're bringing it up to us. Gonna have a few bucks into it, but he didn't hesitate on the price, thought it was a good price, and wants us to swap a motor on it. So that'll be fun. And I think when I yank that out, they want the core back out the column, see if they'll let us unbolt the head. Things are already toast. I think they want the core just for, the hard parts, intake manifold, injectors, not much on there that you can use. But at any rate, we'll check with the junkyard before we, jeopardize our core, but it's obvious this thing's toast, no compression on 3 cylinders. Supposedly, I talked to the fella, he wasn't driving it when this happened. His baby was driving it, and going down the road, and evidently the engine light came on. He didn't pay no attention to it, and he says next thing you know, the engine started making a lot of noise, and that was it. I don't know. That's the story, but it's regardless what the story is, that's what the facts are. it's the end of the road. So thanks for watching. Check us out on Facebook and Google+. Stay tuned to our channel. We got some neat stuff coming out here. Got some pretty good lengthy case studies coming out. And or maybe they've already been out, but we always got stuff coming out. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't, if you want to stay up to date with weekly publications that we roll out each week, as the name implies. So, and just remember, viewers, if I can do it, you can do it. Thanks for watching.